In this video, I'll show you a new data analysis activity, the aggregation. First, let's remember to tell the database that we are going to work on course SQL. Let's explain with the first example what's data aggregation. We want to get the number of issued invoices for each year. This example, is quite different from the previous lessons. Because here we'll have to write a query in the from of the table invoices, since we have to get the number of invoices. But be careful, what's the subject of this query? It's not the invoices anymore. In the previous examples, we made some filters. For example, we wanted the invoices that had a specific detail, or the client that had specific conditions. In this exercise, even though we are talking about invoices, so we'll have to use from invoices. The subject, the analysis dimension of the extraction, is actually the year. It's something different from the single invoice. Every time we find ourselves in this situation, we have to use a new keyword, a new clause, which is group by. It's easy to recognize it from the way the question is formulated. Many times we'll be asked to get for each year, get dividing by year. Get the invoice number by year divided by year. All these ways of seeing mean that the analysis dimension is not the one about the table, neither about the single invoice. But it's something more generic, like it could be for the year or the customer or the type. In this case, it's the year of the invoice is issuing. So the issuing date, let's see here on the Server Explorer on the left. It's available inside table invoices under the column date invoice. But since we want to make a group by year, we don't use group by date invoice, but group by year date invoice. At this point, what I like to call the golden rule, what we put into group by, we can copy-paste it into the select. After we've done it, what could we add to the select? We could add other aggregate informations like a count, a sum, an average. We'll see this little by little with each example. In this case, we want the invoices number, the count of the invoices. To do so, we use count star. Count star actually does not give back the invoices number, but the number of rows that are linked to that group. But since we are inside invoices, the rows number is equal to the invoices. Let's try to highlight all the code and run it. We can see that in the result we don't have a row for each invoice, but we have a row for each year, where year is nothing else than the way that we call the function year applied to data invoice. Let's read the comment. Because the question asks to get the information for each year divided by year, grouped by year with the changing of the year, and all the same ways of saying, our query's output should have as many rows as the amount of different values inside the column year date invoice, or better, the function year applied to the column data invoice. Inside table invoices, we have as default a row for each invoice, and not a row for each year. In order to give back an output that has a row for each year, we must use group by. So the writing process for these query aspects, of course, this is an advice that I'm giving you. It's not necessary, but I really suggest you to do as follows because it's easier. The logic behind is more linear. First, we compile the from, so we use from invoices. Then, if we want the data by year, we use group by the year. In this case, we write the year as year data invoice. Copy-paste of what we put in group by into the select, because if we group something, 99.9% of the times we want to visualize it. Remember that select contains what we'll then visualize in output. Should we add something else? If we don't add anything else, and like this case we just do select year data invoice from invoices group by year date invoice, let's try it real quick. I'm going to comment it. You can see that I simply got one row for each year, but this is very significant. It's always interesting to do more data analysis. to join some measures to make a sum of the import, an average of the import, or simply just a count of the rows with count star. Okay, let's go back to the comment. So we can add to the select more infos like sum, average, minimum, max, count. Let's repeat what we said before. Count counts the number of rows in which every value of the grouped column exists. But inside the invoices table, there's a row for each invoice, so for this case count star is actually the number of invoices. Let's make another example. Get for each year the number of invoices, so that's something about the invoices. But the subject is for each year. What should we do? Group by year. But this time we want something more besides the number of issued invoices like before count star. We want also to add the import sum import. Every time that we use some functions, it's always good to use as, which we have already seen before, in order to rename the column that I see in the output. Let's try and run this query, which is identical to the previous. The only thing we changed is that we added a column into select. Be careful, into select we can only add one column, which is count, sum. We can simply add import. For this thing also, on other databases like MySQL, what happens is a little bit different, but I believe that the most coherent thing is what happens on SQL Server. A query like this fails because I grouped by year, but since there are more invoices in one year, there are more imports. So a query just like this doesn't make much sense because we don't know which import of that many invoices of that year we want to visualize in the only row of the year. MySQL, for example, gives back a random import here, and the query doesn't fail, so you must pay much attention if you're using MySQL. On SQL Server, consistently to what's the syntax of group by, this query fails. If we want to add more column, we must use sum, average, count. Let's see an example that asks for the number of customers for each country. Here it's about working on table customers. But we don't want a list of customers, we want a list of countries, because it's asking for each country. What should we do? Group by country. What's inside group by, we put it into select and add the aggregated info. For this case, the aggregated measure is the count. Count star is the rows number. There's a row for each number, so count star is the number of customers. Okay, here's the result. I'll show again that here there's no order, this order is random. We are not sure that this is going to repeat. If we want to fix a specific order, we must use the clause order by. Let's see the fourth example. We want to get the countries with at least 3 customers. Here we have to use a new keyword. Because here, like usual, in which table is the info inside? The information is inside the customers table, but the subject isn't the customers, but the countries, so we use group by. So, from customers, group by country. Copy-paste into select. Be careful, get the countries with at least 3 customers, it's asking for a filter. Up till now, we always put the filters inside the clause where. But this is a different filter. Why is a different filter? Because it's done after the aggregation on the customer's number per country, which isn't an information that we have inside table customers, because in customers we have infos about the single customer, not the country. The information related to the country appear only after we use group by. This means that the SQL needs a new keyword to make filters. Not only where, but now we are also adding this new keyword having. Having is used to make filters on a group. Or better, after we made a group. Here's a filter on the number of customers linked to the country, a filter on the count. Every time that we have a filter on the count, on the sum, on the average, those are filters that need to be made after the group. So we don't put them into where, but we put them into having. Here, for this case, at least 3 customers is count star, which is the rows number, so the customer's number, major equal to 3. Let's try and run this query. You can see that we get Italy. Here we added count star also into select to make one more check. We could also not put it and just use country residence. This way we would only get Italy.